We've had 3 movies featuring Michael Keaton as Batman: Batman '89, Batman Returns, and 2023's The Flash. He was also in a completed and scrapped Batgirl movie that may or may not ever see the light of day. Yet the reason so many of us look at that first cinematic Batman film with such nostalgic glee is that it was such a risk, such an unknown quantity at the time. Sure, Batman had already proved himself as a comic book icon and a successfully campy TV star, but could the character compete with something like 1978's Superman the movie? Think about it, from the 80s onward, we've had 7 actors play various versions of a live-action Batman. What makes Keaton's version so well loved? Val Kilmer, George Clooney, and Christian Bale were logical successors of the Bruce Wayne role. They look like Bruce Wayne does in the comics for the most part. They all have the acting chops, regardless of how it ended up in their individual movies. George. Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson were more outside-of-the-box casting choices. A risk, if you will. Something that made the audience pause before throwing their arms up in celebration at that casting news. But none of that was as risky as it was back in 1989, when Beetlejuice was announced as Batman. Affleck and Pattinson had a lot to live up to, but Keaton? He had to figure out his path without having any references to base it on. Besides this and this. Yeah, you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. Sit back, relax, grab a bowl of Batman cereal, and let's look back at the chaotic past of the movie that started it all. Batman '89. Back in 1978, Warner Brothers had a massive hit with Superman starring Christopher Reeve, and they were looking to develop more DC comic live-action adaptations. They singled out Batman as the most attractive and logical choice. When it was announced that Michael Keaton would be playing Batman, it wasn't the internet that erupted. It was the newspapers. They couldn't get past the fact that this comedian would be playing the first serious and dark version of Batman on the big screen. A group of comic book fans signed a petition for Warner Brothers to stop this atrocious casting from happening. However, Warner Brothers was smart enough to trust Tim Burton's casting choice. You see, Tim Burton couldn't wrap his head around a typical 80s action hero playing Batman. It was precisely the fact that Keaton didn't fit that mold that made Burton so certain of his participation. Keaton's ability to play an unassuming and quirky billionaire bachelor gave the character more nuance and relatability as Bruce Wayne. Keaton looks like a guy who would need to dress up as a bat for the intimidation factor. Someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't need to dress up in a costume. He just needs to snap your neck. Other actors considered for the role of Batman were Alec Baldwin, Mel Gibson, Kevin Costner, and Willem Dafoe. Dafoe was a favorite of Tim Burton's to play the role, but he ultimately went with Michael Keaton. It's understandable why fans would be taken aback by this casting choice. Keaton's biggest films up to this point had been Night Shift, Mr. Mom, and Beetlejuice, another Tim Burton team-up. How were audiences supposed to know what he would do with the role? Keaton is a master of manic energy. He can be very wired and goofy, like his performances in Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice. But his intensity always shines through. In the movie Clean and Sober, he shows a much more dramatic side of himself. Yes, it was mixed with comedic parts, but in my opinion, this could have given an insight to upset fans at the time of Keaton's versatility. Before Warner Brothers landed on the tone that Tim Burton established, they were playing around with a lighter, goofier version of Batman. Believe it or not, they were considering Bill Murray to play Batman and Eddie Murphy as Robin. I think they still had the 60s television show in their heads. However, it was quickly decided that this movie would be dark and gritty. Batman '89 has something that I haven't really gotten from another iteration of The Dark Knight since then. The vibe of this movie is just so artistic. From the set design, costumes, Danny Elfman's music, the bat suit, it really is a work of art. I understand that nostalgia and opinion weigh heavily on what makes a good Batman. But here are the reasons why I think Keaton was lightning in a bottle as the character. 1. His eyes and eyebrows really are the first thing I think about when Keaton comes to mind. His eyes are intense, and there's a mystery behind them that sells the bat cowl more than other Batmen to me. His archy eyebrows are even molded on the mask, see? 2. His Batman voice. It's not over the top, it's chill and effective. 3. His Bruce Wayne is uncomfortable and socially awkward. He's not always sure of himself either. This personality fits with a guy who fights crime as his main pastime. Compare that with George Clooney's Bruce Wayne, for example. couldn't be further apart. It's like Clooney's portrayal of Bruce Wayne is as if he never became Batman and was just a billionaire playboy.
And he does that bobblehead thing a lot.
4. The Batsuit is so freaking Art Deco. The Batman and Batman Returns suits evoke such a mood and atmosphere. It's the type of thing that evoked a magical feeling in kids and adults alike, me included. They were much less about functionality than future Batman suits, but who cares? Look at it. 5. Look at the way he expresses himself with bad guys. It's badass. He doesn't mess around. He's got kind of a sarcastic feel to how he deals with thugs. Look at that smirk. Of course, it's not just Michael Keaton that makes Batman '89 such a lasting classic. Tim Burton is one of the best visual directors that has ever existed. His Batman films are drenched in mood and distinctive design. You could of course see this in Edward Scissorhands, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Beetlejuice. But he took that style to the next level and really honed in on it for Batman. You know what? Instead of plopping Batman in The Flash, they should have hired Tim Burton to do a third Batman film with Michael Keaton. Let them just go wild. It would have killed at the box office, I'm telling you. The legendary Jack Nicholson needs to be given immense credit for his role in the success of Batman '89 as well. His name alone made people look at this project differently. Nicholson has always been associated with quality films. People knew that with him involved, something special had to be in store for them. Why would such a big star put his name on something like this unless he knew it would be great? That's what star power can do for a movie. It can legitimize a risky prospect like this one. Jack Nicholson initially agreed to a modest $6 million for his role as the Joker. He opted to reduce his usual fee, which was around $10 million at that time, in exchange for a percentage of Batman's profits, particularly from merchandise featuring his character's likeness. Nicholson made more than $50 million after everything was said and done, thanks to the movie's impressive box office performance. Now that's some shrewd business sense right there. I'm sure it put a smile on his face again and again. The suits at Warner Brothers must have known something we didn't, because they positioned this movie to be a merchandising juggernaut. The guts it took for them to bet big on this movie can't be overlooked. This movie was paving the way for the future of comic book movies and cinema in general. I personally had a Batman costume, toys, shirts, and who didn't want this Batcave? There was also a 1-900 Batman number you could call, probably leading you to this holiday catalog that they were hawking at the beginning of the Batman VHS tape. On the same VHS tape, there was this Coke commercial that was so good at making me want an ice-cold soda. Yeah, the marketing campaign got people excited. The clincher, though, was when Warner Brothers released a teaser trailer for the film. Fans got to see the Batsuit, the Batmobile, Jack Nicholson's Joker, and most importantly, that Keaton was playing a serious and moody Bruce Wayne. It did a lot to calm the negative backlash. He looked great in the role, and the movie looked fantastic. Burton's iconic vision, matched with Keaton's performance, started the Batmania fans experience to this day, except it was all brand new to everyone back then. It was the Wild West of Batman movies back then, and it was the new sheriff in town. When Batman was released to theaters in the summer of 1989, it made a whopping $411 million worldwide at the box office. That bat symbol was everywhere. But what was next? Well, we got a bombastic Burton sequel starring Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Danny DeVito that pissed parents and the entire McDonald's corporation off. And we got an alternate universe sequel to that film 30 years later, which we'll dive into in another video. I'm Scotty D. Watch these videos next. Shameless bastard! Ugh!